And Victor, we're going to have it recorded and posted for you.
Yep, we are recording this. So welcome everyone to our webinar today. Zeb and I are going to show you how to integrate the PeekPro booking software with QuickBooks Online using a program called TransactionPro Importer as the bridge. And we're going to take you through that process step by step, and then we're going to show you why getting into this detail in your books is really important in creating the reports that you need to make more informed business decisions. So a couple quick housekeeping things in our Zoom webinar today. First, Zeb and I prefer to use the chat for questions rather than the Q&A tool. That way everyone can see the full conversation and talk and support each other in the chat. So go ahead and find the chat in your Zoom window now and give us a post saying your name, where you're from. Also, you'll notice that there is a little drop-down menu in the chat where you can change it from just posting to panelists to posting to both panelists and attendees. That is how you make it so that the other attendees in the group are also able to see what you're posting. Now, Zeb and I have packed this webinar with lots of important details. We've got a couple quick spots in the middle where we might pause to look at some questions, but we'll probably save most of them for the end, and we are happy to stick around for a little while after the hour to answer some of those questions. We also want to respect everyone's time today and make sure that we finish the main presentation before the top of the hour. So nonetheless, post your questions in the chat as you think of them, and that way they don't get forgotten. As many of you already know, tour companies have some unique financial and accounting issues. There are often high and low seasons and lots of different expenses that go into overhead and some complex choices to make. The common strategy is often to just ignore the finances as much as possible until tax time. Well, today we're going to be talking about how you can automate some of your daily data processes to save you a ton of time while still getting the detail that you need to gain the next level of success in your business. So let's go ahead and start with some introductions. Zeb, how about you go first?
Ingrid, I'd love to. Thank you for the introduction. Welcome, everybody. So as Ingrid said, I'm Zeb Smith, and I am the Chief Empowerment Officer at my company, Ascent Accounting and Consulting. So I'm located in Durango, Colorado, but work with outfitters and guides primarily all across the nation. Hallelujah for technology, right? So I'm a CPA, but don't do the traditional tax and compliance work that most like stuffy old accountants do. Rather, I've built my business around empowering owners to achieve dreams. So I'm your go-to financial accountability buddy surrounding your business. Outside of work, which I do love, by the way, I'm a proud new father to a 3-month-old boy. And as evidenced by the photos on my slide, I'm an avid hunter, hiker, and runner. So when I'm not helping business owners ascend their dreams, I'm most likely ascending a peak, which was the original motivation behind Ascent. So Ingrid, can you believe that this webinar is like totally booked out with all 100 seats at least registered?
Yeah, I'm stoked. We've got 50 people on here already, 51, and climbing as people, filter in a little bit late. So this is great.
That's amazing. Yeah. So when we brainstormed this idea last fall, I knew it'd be a hot webinar, but I didn't expect it to be this active. So that's awesome. Ingrid, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I can do that. A little bit about me. Hi, everyone. I am Ingrid Edstrom. I am the Priestess of Profits at Polymath LLC. And yes, that is my actual title. I love spreading the gospel of healthy business, and you can find Polymath on YouTube doing everything from hoity-toity webinars for other accounting professionals to fun business education videos with puppets. Yes, I said with puppets. Today's webinar is somewhere in the middle of that very broad spectrum. I am a total nerd who actually loves all this accounting and business stuff. I also love travel. Those two things are like chocolate and peanut butter to me. I love working with tour entrepreneurs because, like me, you all are adventurous, curious, free spirits who deeply care about our world and the people in it. I love supporting the businesses that help me to experience all of the wonder and adventure in the world around us. So I want to thank each of you for being here with us today. My vision at Polymath is to make the world a better place built upon a foundation of thriving small businesses. Helping your business succeed and helping you follow your dreams fulfills my greater purpose on this planet. I learned a lot of this stuff so that you don't have to. You don't need to become an accountant to have a good understanding of your business finances. And now Zeb and I are going to show you some great tools to get started. You ready for this? So we're going to go ahead and dive right into the meat of things. We are going to be going over some pretty fancy stuff today that may feel a little overwhelming if this is the first time you're being introduced to these concepts. The most important thing that I want to start with is that you do not have to do any of this alone. In the next handful of slides, we're going to go over how you can set up an import workflow between PeekPro and QuickBooks Online to get the reports that you need to really take your business to the next level. If you're using a different booking software, or maybe you're on QuickBooks Desktop, still stick around. We've got a lot of great things that we're going to be going over today, and some of that can be adapted to fit your tools. And you can go ahead and post your question about your specific situation in our Facebook group, which I've got linked up here on the slide, so we can point you in the right direction and keep this conversation going. So, Zeb, do you want to go ahead and tell them what we will be covering today?
Absolutely, I'd love to. So today's webinar is going to follow these 3 stages. The first is how to get information from your reservation software into your accounting system. We'll show you how to map your data between the 2 systems and show the common good and bad notifications to look for. After the information is in QuickBooks Online, we'll introduce financial reporting and select key performance indicators that every tour and activity owner should monitor in their business regardless of size or complexity. Then we'll use our mock-up adventure company, Gators Bayou Tours, to see how Gator uses these reports and KPIs to improve the financial health of his business and to demonstrate how you can use them in your business as well. With any time left, we'll open up for Q&A at the end. So if you have questions throughout the webinar, throw it in the chat box, and time permitting, we'll address them in real time or during the Q&A session at the end.
Fantastic. Okay, so to start us off briefly, I want to explain a definition. When someone uses the word app, that is simply short for software application, and that software can be installed on your computer, on your mobile device, or it could be a program that you log into on the internet. App includes all of those things, not just the buttons on your phone. Now, as you probably know, our world is moving to the cloud, and this is particularly important for tour companies because you travel. You need software resources that can travel with you and be accessed by each of your team members that needs access, and they need to be able to access it securely from anywhere. That is why QuickBooks Online is my favorite option for accounting software, and I would love to see in the chat who in the room is already using QuickBooks Online, and if you're not using QuickBooks Online, what accounting software you are using. Now, I'm guessing that since this webinar is focusing on integration between QuickBooks Online and Peek, that most of you are probably using Peek. If you're using a different booking software than Peek, please post in the chat so that we can get an idea of the diversity in the room as far as booking software goes as well. There are also a lot of other apps out there for things like time tracking, expense tracking, plus apps like Zapier and TransactionPro that can help your booking software and other apps integrate with your QuickBooks if they don't already do that automatically. So make sure that you use apps that integrate one way or another so that you aren't spending a ton of time putting the same redundant information into disparate programs. Now, Peek does have a Zapier integration, which is why I've included it up here on this slide. However, Zapier is not really the best way to get your data from Peek into QuickBooks Online. It's better for integrating your Peek with other apps like a CRM, which is a customer relationship manager, or maybe your newsletter tool.
So Ingrid, why is that? What happens when you try to integrate Peek with QBO using Zapier?
Good question. So the reports currently available in Peek are not optimized for a full Zapier integration with QuickBooks Online. So it could be missing some essential information such as your add-ons or your sales tax information. Now, if you have a super simple business, like a little walking tour where people only ever buy one thing at a time and you're not in an area where you need to worry about sales tax, it could be worth looking into Zapier. And I found that most tour businesses that are a bit more just a bit more complex and need a more complete solution than the Peek Zapier integration. Now, a thing to consider, the Peek programming team is always working really, really hard, looking for ways to improve their offering to you. And they're working on a direct integration between Peek and QuickBooks Online. And they even consulted with me and Deb a bit on the elements needed to map their data the best way for that integration. We love how collaborative the Peek team is, which is why we chose Peek to focus on in our webinar today. That direct integration does not yet have a rollout date, so we wanted to make sure that you have the tools to get these softwares talking to each other now rather than waiting. So with that, let's go ahead and dive into showing you the step-by-step process for using TransactionPro to move your data from Peek over to QuickBooks Online. Here we are in a Peek sample company, which should look pretty similar to yours. And from the Peek dashboard, you can go ahead and click on the Reports tool on the menu on the left side of the screen. And that will bring us to the Reports menu, where you can select the Summary Report type on the very top. Now, keep in mind that if you're using a different booking software than Peek, you are going to need to look carefully through the report options to ensure that you're getting a report that has the level of detail that you need. Some booking apps may require custom reporting, but if enough of their users are all saying that they need the same things, they will likely roll out an update with the report that you need. And the red dot on this screen is where you can see that I'm clicking on things and trying to get them highlighted for you. So once we're in that Peek summary report, you want to set the date range at the top of the screen, taking care to ensure that you always select the day after the last day that you exported. Never export the day that you're currently on. If you export today before today is done, then you risk missing any sales information that happens after the time that you exported today. So either get in the habit of exporting a closed week or month on a regular schedule, or always export through yesterday, whatever yesterday is. After you set your date range, you can click on the line for US dollars total at the bottom of the screen. For those of you who aren't in the United States, it might have a different currency listed there. You can see where the red dot is. That is where we want to go ahead and click. And that will open up the detailed transaction data for that time period. But you need to make sure that you have all of the info, all of the fields that you need in here before exporting it for QuickBooks Online. To get all the details you need, you'll need to click the Customize button. So up in the upper right-hand corner, it says Customize Table. You want to click there. And that will bring you to this window where you can drag and drop the fields you need for your QuickBooks export. And you can see that I've already saved a template called QB Export. We're going to dig into these fields just a little bit so you can see why each of them is important. On this slide, I've listed all of the fields that I included in my QuickBooks export that I saved here in Peek. And I know that you're not going to remember all the detail that we're going through right now, which is why this webinar will be available on both the Polymath and Ascent YouTube channels, so you can watch it again later when you're actually going through this process in the moment. I also know that rambling off the definitions for each of these terms here on the webinar would just be data overload. So what I've done instead is I included the link on this slide to the Peek help article where it lists all of the definitions for their reporting terms. So that's that link, and you can also find that by clicking Help within your Peek program and then searching for the word glossary. That will bring up their help article that lists off all of these definitions. As we discuss some of these fields in the upcoming slides, and we won't be using all of them today, keep in mind that your needs for your specific company are very unique. You might not need all of these. So I've made bold the ones that are especially important. You will want to tailor your export to your specific needs and not export extra fields that you aren't going to use. So those are the fields that I included in my custom report in Peek. And once I got them all dragged over and put in the order that I wanted, I clicked on Save as Preset and called it QB Export, and then clicked Done to exit the customization and see the report that we've created. So here's how that report looks in Peek before the export. To get this data out of Peek and into the proper format, all you need to do is click on the Export button in the upper right corner, and then go ahead and click the button to download it as CSV. And then go ahead and open that CSV file using Excel, Numbers, Google Sheets, or a similar spreadsheet program, whichever one your favorite is. You want to set up your export from Peek so that you can do as little editing as possible in this spreadsheet. Anytime you have to edit the data in the spreadsheet, there is a possibility for human error to occur. If you make a mistake, you could end up importing incorrect information into your books or possibly deleting transactions that you actually did want to import. So you want to be really careful when making changes here.
Ingrid, we're all human, and we all make mistakes sometimes, right? So what are some things to be aware of, and if we do end up importing something wrong, can it be undone?
That is a great question, Zeb. So some things to be aware of are, for example, the status column. If you don't want to import the canceled tours, then you'll want to sort this spreadsheet by that column and remove the canceled ones. However, if you got paid for that tour and then it was canceled and you issued a refund, I would recommend including those canceled lines, as not including them could throw off your deposits from Peek as you're trying to batch those deposits in QuickBooks. Also, you want to make sure that your money columns are formatted as numbers, not just text. TransactionPro won't recognize a number that is formatted as text. So making sure that the fields are formatted correctly. And you'll notice other strange little formatting nuances that will make your life easier as you go. There's a little bit of a learning curve, and it's going to take a little bit of practice. And once again, every business is unique. So you'll develop the steps for your unique process and learn some of those little tricks as you go along. As far as undoing those, I'm going to touch on that after you've seen what the process looks like in TransactionPro. So we'll come back to how to undo it if something, if a big mistake happens.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So this is TransactionPro. I really love this program. It's very affordable at around $20, $25 a month, depending on how many users you need. And they do offer a free trial if you want to check it out. And in just a bit, I'm going to give you a URL for that and a promo code for a 10% discount. So keep your eyes out for that in just a little bit. Once you're logged into TransactionPro, and you can see here we're logged into Gators Bayou Tours, which Procrastinator Gator is one of the characters in my puppet show. So you can go check him out if you want to on YouTube. We're going to go ahead and click on the Import button in Gators TransactionPro here, and that brings us to the window where we can choose the transaction type that we are importing. Now we're going to want to put the bookings in as invoices using the activity date, and then apply the payments to those invoices using the payment date. And we'll show you why that two-step process is important in just a bit. For now, we're going to start by selecting our invoice transaction type. And then we need to click to find our spreadsheet where we want to, upload. So we'll select the correct file from where we saved it on our computer after we've downloaded it from Peek. And then click on the green Select File and Sheet button in the lower right-hand corner. And we only have a single sheet to import right now. With more advanced users, I will sometimes split out the invoices and different payment types into separate sheets using different templates. And that can be especially handy for companies that get a lot of payments from affiliates like TripAdvisor that maybe they want to keep separate from their other deposits. But for right now, we want to keep it as simple as possible for our example, and we're going to go ahead and click Import Sheet on the one sheet that we have here. That brings us to the field mapping screen in TransactionPro. Now, similar to how we saved the QB export report in Peek, you can save your column matching options so that you only need to do this complicated setup piece once. I saved my fields here as Peek Gator Import. You can see in the little drop-down menu there. And here, I'm going to go into what fields I've matched up. So note that if I don't list a field here, that it's part of the TransactionPro window, it might not be necessary if it's not listed here on this slide. Once again, each business is unique, but you probably don't need the shipping address, for example, in your export. So the reference number is our booking ID. Now, straight away, I want to reference one of the pitfalls that I've listed on the right side of this slide. Recently, QuickBooks Online made an update that warns you if you're creating an invoice using an invoice number that you've already used before. This can result in an error when uploading to QuickBooks Online. So if you're a company that receives multiple payments on a single booking, if that happens, you might need to have a distinguishing letter or number after the booking ID, so like a -1 or a -A, to ensure that each one of those numbers ends up being totally unique. Otherwise, it'll kick it back in an error for you. The next field we have is customer. You don't need to use a customer name in, you do need to use a customer name in QuickBooks Online in order to have invoices and payments. but I don't recommend putting in your actual customer names from Peek, as that will create a huge list of customers in QuickBooks Online that you may only have those customers purchase your services once, so you don't need them all listed in QuickBooks. Instead, what we've done is we set a default value for that field, and we called it Peek Customer for all of these transactions. The transaction date is set to the activity date, and this is important to ensure that your income is being shown as earned in your books when the tour happens, not when the payment happens. And we'll get into that more in just a bit when we get into the reports in QuickBooks. You can see that we're using the activity add-on field from Peek for both the line item and the class fields, and this is because these two fields do very different things in QuickBooks. Now, you may decide that you want to organize your classes in QuickBooks slightly different than your items, and that's okay. For ease of simplicity, in our example today, we're going to go ahead and make them the same thing, and Zeb is going to be showing you how the class tracking shows up in your reports in QuickBooks in just a bit. The tax amount is important if you collect sales taxes from your customers. If you're not in an area where you need to worry about sales tax, you can skip it. That's the second pitfall that I list. Make sure that you really understand the sales tax requirements for your region. Now, there are a lot of different options that you can use for the line description, and it's really just for your information. So you can leave it blank if you want to. I figure why not use it to record the tickets items so that we can see the breakdown of adults and kids. You could use this for customer name, notes, whatever you want to see in there. The line amount would usually be the base price. I say usually because depending on how complex your sales are and how much detail you want recorded in your books, you can also jump through some fancy hoops with discounts, add-ons, fees, and that leads us to our third pitfall. For the more advanced user, it may require some additional playing around in the Excel spreadsheet that is beyond the basic scope of our webinar today. So for right now, I want to remind you to keep this as simple as possible, and you're going to have to try some things and do small exports of just 1 or 2 transactions to see how the information comes through and make sure it works for you before moving forward. And then the last bullet here is just that the memo in QuickBooks Online is a great place for your notes field if that's a tool that you regularly use in Peek and if you want those details in QuickBooks. And be sure to save your mapping in TransactionPro. I cannot tell you how many times I've clicked to go to the next page and then promptly said something inappropriate for a webinar because I remembered a moment too late to save. So if you click on the back button and forgot to save, it's gone. So be sure to save. And to do that, you just have to click the Save Mapping Options button on the left side of that mapping window in TransactionPro and give your map a name. And if you end up using TransactionPro for multiple different things, such as importing invoices from another program as well, you can have multiple maps saved and just select the one that you want from the drop-down menu for each import. Now, I know that we just took a long time to go through that mapping stuff, but that is a piece that you only have to do once so long as you save. Usually, you'll just pass through this screen by clicking Preview and Export, as there won't be anything here to change. Then you can review your data in Peek and make sure it all looks good and click Import. And then it'll ask if we're sure, and we'll say yes. And then I wanted to show you what it looks like when you get an error so that you don't panic when this occasionally happens. All you need to do is click on the field that is highlighted, and it will tell you what the problem was. Now, often you can fix it right here in this TransactionPro window, and then you can learn from it and improve your spreadsheet process moving forward to save you time in the future. So here you can see now that I've clicked on that highlighted field that the issue here was that I didn't change the dollar values from text to numbers in the spreadsheet. So I just updated them here in TransactionPro, and now we're good to go, and I can click Import again. And now we get the happy success message. So one really important thing to note is that when you get an error, any lines in your import that did not have errors will have imported successfully. And that means that you need to fix the lines that have errors here in TransactionPro and get them imported. Do not start the whole process over again, as that will duplicate the successful lines. Which brings us back to that question that Zeb asked earlier about how to undo things when a mistake is made. If you end up duplicating some entries or importing a bunch of stuff incorrectly, you've got a few options. The first one is that you can go into QuickBooks, find each of those transactions, one by one and delete them and then start your import over. If there's only a handful, it's not the end of the world. The second one would be to use a QuickBooks Online backup program like Rewind to be able to just step back in time to the moment before you made the mistake in your books. And this is another monthly subscription, but it may be worth it for the peace of mind, especially if you're playing with hundreds of transactions at a time. The third option is that TransactionPro also has a deleter feature that we are not getting into today. I do recommend using extreme caution when using this or any deleter tool, as you really want to make sure that you don't inadvertently delete a bunch of transactions that you didn't intend to. So on to the next step. When we are done importing your invoices, you can click the Choose Import Type on the left side of the screen to go back to the beginning of the process, which is the screen where we select our payment, our transaction type. And this time we're going to choose the Receive Payment transaction type. And then we're going to use the same spreadsheet as we used for the invoices and click Select File and Sheet again. And then click to import the same sheet again, provided that we haven't split the different payment methods into separate sheets like I mentioned before. And then just like with the invoices, we need to map our fields and save our mapping. So here are the field mapping for the payments. Peek does not have a separate payment ID field like some other booking apps like FareHarbor have. So for this example, we're going to just use the booking ID number for the payment as well. These reference number fields are really important because, well, one, they're required fields, but also they are the best way to search for a specific transaction in your QuickBooks. So it's a good thing to have them match the transaction ID that Peek uses. For the payments, our transaction date is the purchase date, not the activity date. We record the payment on the date when the money changes hands, but we record the invoice for the date that the activity begins, and we'll explain a bit more on why this is important in just a bit. The customer, once again, is Peek customer, same as on the invoices. The deposit to account is also a default value, and you want that one to say undeposited funds, as that is what will put all of these transactions into your deposit window in QuickBooks to be batched into their correct deposit so you can match them up with your online banking. The invoice apply to is the booking ID, as we also use that for our invoice, and we want to make sure that each payment gets applied to the correct invoices. Now remember in the pitfalls earlier that I talked about the importance of having unique invoice numbers. Keep that in mind here. If you added a unique character to a booking ID that had multiple payments on it, you want to do the same thing here so that the payments automatically get applied correctly. And finally, the line amount is the total, and this should match the invoice total. You want to make sure that your payment, it matches the invoice, otherwise it's not going to match up right. It's not going to be correct. So I've included some tips on the right side of this slide. The first is just a reminder to ensure that you batch your deposits correctly. I don't get into that process here, as Intuit has some easy videos on that included in their basic help tools, and that process isn't unique to what we're doing here today. So feel free to check out the Intuit help if you need help batching your deposits. And then I mentioned a couple of important reports for you to review in your QuickBooks, and I'm going to show you those in just a moment. So once again, make sure that you save your mapping, then preview and import, review it in Peek, click import. Yes, we are sure. And all went successfully. Woohoo! So when you're done, you can simply close TransactionPro and open up QuickBooks to see your great work in action. And you can check your work in QuickBooks Online by reviewing the Audit Log report, which is a special report found under the COG menu. Here we are in the Audit Log, and you can see that we imported one invoice and one payment in our little example today. So we're checking our work to make sure that everything went well. And here is where things start getting really fun. So you'll all want to make sure to run your accounts receivable aging summary report after each import. And you'll find that report by clicking on the reports menu on the left side of the screen. And then it's generally one of the reports that's listed under favorites right at the top. So here you can see an AR aging report with the current date that shows Gator's total accounts receivable is at negative $50,000. So that is because we imported the invoices using their activity dates, which were in the future. We imported the payments for the dates the payments happened, which is in the past. Gator received payments from his customers for over $50,000 worth of tours that are happening in the future. He hasn't earned that money yet. And Zeb is going to get into some more delicious reports that go a bit deeper into this in just a moment. What I really want to show you quick first is when we set the date in the accounts receivable aging report to way in the future. So here I've set it for 2025. There's nothing listed. That means that all of the invoices have payments fully applied and that all of the payments are fully applied to invoices. Nothing is left over. If something were showing up on this report, it means that something with the import went a little bit wrong, and you might need to either apply some payments to invoices or see if something got duplicated. It gives you a great place to look and check for errors to make sure that there's nothing left over in your books that shouldn't be there. This is a great error checking tool. So, as promised, here is the link to where you can find TransactionPro, and also here's the promo code, and that code will get you 10% off on an annual product subscription, not the monthly, and it's good through January 31st, 2020. And I think that we might have some time, a few minutes for questions. What have you been seeing coming through the chat, Zeb?
Yep, so is there a integration with QuickBooks Desktop?
So most programs don't have a direct integration with QuickBooks Desktop. QuickBooks Desktop changed their overall integration system several years ago, and a lot of programs that used to integrate with QuickBooks Desktop can't anymore. It became more difficult. That said, I believe TransactionPro does still have a desktop program, and I think last I used it, because I haven't used the desktop version in quite a while, last time I used it, that was a program that you pay for once and download to your computer, and it was a couple $100. Whereas the QBO TransactionPro is a subscription, so you can pay monthly or annually, and it's a subscription rather than a one-time purchase. That might have changed. I haven't used the desktop version of TransactionPro in a while, but it's certainly worth looking into if you're on QuickBooks Desktop.
And Ingrid, so I do have a question too. All of those steps seem like a lot of work. So is it a good, or is it going to take a long time to do it? You know, what's the expected return on it? And after all, like, we're encouraging people to do stuff in their business that will ultimately get them outside and not doing data entry in the stuffy old office, right?
Yes, of course. That's a great question, Zeb. So it really depends on your time investments. If you're not getting the details that you need currently from your reports, and it would take you more than half an hour to get your transactions entered from your Peek to QuickBooks Online manually. So if typing every single transaction in QuickBooks would take you more than half an hour, it is worth thinking about this. I have some complex clients that need uploads from multiple different sources, and whether they have 200 transactions or 2,000 in a busy month, the whole routine, once you got it all set up, takes about 20 minutes. And it gives them so much better information that they can use to make informed decisions. So now, Zeb, do you want to lead us through some of the awesome reporting capability in QBO that results from our great work with this import?
I would love to.
Woohoo.
So let's go ahead, and we're going to do a general introduction to reporting with a quick intro to financial reports, okay? So the main reports that you're going to want to get familiar with is your profit and loss and your balance sheet, okay? So the profit and loss, or commonly referred to as the P&L, shows your sales and expenses over a set period of time and how they generate profit. The key categories to know are revenue, cost of sales, operating expenses, and net income, okay? So the balance sheet tells you how healthy your business or unhealthy your business is. It shows your assets, which is everything your business owns, including cash in the bank and your equipment, minus your liabilities, which is everyone you owe money to, including loans, credit cards, and open bills. So the result is your equity, and just like equity in your home, you want the value of your assets to be greater than the money you owed. A negative equity is a very bad thing. So even if you're like a tiny business and as a sole proprietor, it is important to have a correct balance sheet. I've encountered a number of situations where small business owners want to get a home loan and they can't because their books from their business that's their primary income aren't clean and correct. So if your tax accountant is telling you that you don't need to worry about this because you're too small, you might want to consider getting a new tax accountant. Every business needs a real balance sheet, and it's not hard to do right when you're using the right software. Okay.
Great point, Zeb. Love it.
Thank you. So as for the KPIs, or key performance indicators, and from an owner's perspective, there are a couple of KPIs you should check regularly to make sure your business is financially healthy and humming well. They are gross profit margin, net profit margin, and current ratio. So we're going to go through these with Gator in just a minute. The profit and loss shows your gross profit margin, which is your gross profit divided by your revenue. These are your direct variable costs divided by revenue. So every business will be different based on how their business is structured. Comparing your business to another that isn't like yours can be like comparing apples to oranges. Instead, look at where you want to be with your particular business and set your goals accordingly. At a glance, this can be looked at by year, quarter, and by month. And over time, you'll get used to seeing this number and recognize when things are going well or when they're going bad. If it ever drops significantly, it usually means direct costs have increased. So you can then drill into specific months and even specific activities and see what's happening and take a corrective action. The second one is net profit margin. So this is the total income retained after all business expenses, including your owner pay, divided by revenue. Make sure you're including your owner pay to truly understand your profitability. Depending on how your business is structured, you might have to do some calculations outside of QuickBooks to capture this. Hit me up after the webinar if you want to chat about this with your business in particular, okay? The current ratio is the spread between current assets and current liabilities. Ideally, a healthy business should have twice as many current assets as current liabilities. For tours and activities businesses specifically, the thing to look for is that your cash is greater than your deferred revenue. And deferred revenue is money collected for future activities. Using the import system Ingrid just showed you, you will see this is a negative accounts receivable in QuickBooks. And at any given point, enough cash needs to be held to cover future activities in case of any unforeseen returns, for droughts, cancellations, etc.
Nice. So we highly encourage each one of you to read the books Accounting for the Numberphobic by my friend Don Fotopoulos, and also Simple Numbers, Straight Talk, Big Profits by Greg Crabtree. Both of these are written to speak to business owners regardless of your background or business size, and they can help you to understand your key financials and key performance indicators, KPIs, that you need to know to monitor your business.
Great. Thank you, Ingrid. So let's go ahead and we'll jump into QuickBooks. So this is the report screen in QuickBooks Online. To access reports, click Reports on the left column. QuickBooks has already captured the balance sheet and profit and loss as a favorite for you under the Standard tab. So let's start with looking at Gator's balance sheet. QuickBooks auto-populates the balance sheet as of last month. So to change the date range, you're going to want to scroll up and adjust the reporting period. QuickBooks has some standard options such as all data, last fiscal year, this year to last month, and many more. Become familiar with these because they can be very, very useful. Also, you can use the boxes to the right to build custom dates to capture multiple years. The other very useful dropdown is the Display Columns By option, which is where you can display columns by month, quarter, year, or classes. You'll see how Gator uses all of these to improve the financial health of his business next. So I encourage you to use the Save Customization button in any reports you generate often. I'm going to give you the best of the best here in a second. So take note and save these. As you're going to see, these can be super powerful and useful reports. So let's take a look at Gator's balance sheet, and more specifically, his current ratio for last year. Note the date at the top. This is where you can check to see if you're looking at the right date and time. So this particular report says, as of December 31st, 2019, Gator has 117,000 cash in the bank and has collected 58,000 in prepayments for future activities. The negative accounts receivable is the invoice import, which Ingrid walked you through a minute ago. We see that Gator has almost twice as much cash in the bank as prepayments collected from customers. This is great. Way to go, Gator.
Woohoo!
So let's go ahead and we'll check where he was at the end of last year or the year before. So this report says, as of December 31st, 2018, Gator had 68,000 cash in the bank and had collected 66,000 in prepayments for future activities. We say Gator has next to no money available for operations above and beyond the prepayments. Almost all of the cash on hand is tied up in prepayments. So Gator, no bueno.
No, Gator, got to fix that, definitely.
So with a little deeper look, and by using the months dropdown in the display column by option, we can see how much money Gator had in the bank and prepaids at the end of every month. Gator actually had less money in the bank than the prepayments he had collected from customers from June and July. Okay, so those are those second and third columns. Yep.
Naughty
He was in the
Gator!
hole. Very naughty Gator. So, but don't worry. There is a fix, and we'll show you that after we look at his profit and loss a little bit.
Okay.
So back to the report screen, and we can click profit and loss. So let's generate a report showing all dates by years. See the drop downs in the upper left? This is a great report for seeing your growth year by year. Be sure to save it as a customized report for the future. Okay. So by looking at the report showing all dates by year, we can quickly see his gross profit margins for 2018 and 2019. Gator runs a smaller shop with a few guides and boat expenses as his primary direct costs. So based on his personal needs, Gator and his accountant friend determined he needed a minimum 70% profit margin to stay afloat. In 2018, before he hired his accountant in 2019, he had a 60% profit margin, with which some future analysis left him sunk at the bottom of the bayou that year. So take a look at the information and calculations on the left. Do you see how I arrived to the gross profit margins? In 2018, it was 60,000 divided by 100,000 to be 60%. And then in 2019, 123 divided by 173 is your 71%. So let's take a look at the detail behind the Bayou Adventures revenue in 2018. That's the box that I've squared in green. So specifically, let's take a look at that one, which is the largest revenue stream by activity type. So by looking at the profit and loss by class, we can see that the Bayou Island Charter is not meeting the mark at a 42% gross profit margin, but the Bayou Zipline Tour is doing screamingly well at 91% or 92%. So Gator has to make a call. What's he gonna do? Do we have any guesses? Ingrid, what would you suggest for Gator?
Ooh, what would I suggest? Okay. So looking at this, I think Gator has a few options. He could cut the island charter completely, but that probably isn't the best option since he gets some great reviews on that charter. So that being said, he would only need to double the Bayou Island Charter Adventures prices per service to meet that 70% gross profit margin that you want him to get up to. Or he can do something a little less dramatic, like cross-selling the charter with any of his other activities on the island. So in essence, it would be available only as an upsell to the other two activities and no longer as a standalone option.
Those are some incredible thoughts, Ingrid. Those are also very good, like top line suggestions for Gator. If he does do the cross-selling and upselling as you've suggested, he'd be able to even better utilize his guides and boat costs as well. So effectively utilizing the expenses across all Bayou Adventures. So looking a little bit further on in that 2018 activity, another thing to note is that here's the detail of Gator's operating overhead fixed costs by month in 2018. So when Gator finally called his accountant to chat about 2018, which mind you was too late since they met in 2019 and not when tours were actually taking place, Gator wanted to know why he only net $4,000 in profit for the year. That's that number in the bottom right-hand corner. So Gator and his accountant took a look at his profit and loss by month and discovered that despite him having next to no sales in November and December, as evidenced by the significant drop in gross profit on the top line, he still spent close to $10,000 in operating fixed costs during those 2 months. So what the heck, Gator, right? Looking at the detail, Gator noticed an opportunity to better negotiate with his ad agency. He could remove unnecessary entertainment expenses, and he could better utilize his admin employees to reduce some of the other items. So these are 3 very simple fixes with potentially significant positive impacts on his bottom line. So at the end of 2018, Gator had lots of work on, right? What did he do? First off, he hired a professional accountant and business coach. He set up a bank account for all of his prepaid activities, increased the Bayou prices and all other activities only by 5%, analyzed profitability of each of the individual activities, discovered that there was areas to cross use his guides and employees, picked specific activities as only an add-on option and not standalone offers, reviewed his operating expenses, focused advertising on the most profitable activities, and renegotiated with his ad group. So ultimately, he ends up dropping his ad spend from 14% of sales down to about 3.5% of sales, and he removed any unnecessary entertainment spending. Finally, shut down during the shoulder season, and Gator went to the Amazon.
Nice. Woohoo, Gator gets a vacation.
And the results, here we go. So by opening a second bank account called the Held and Trust account, he made sure all prepaid deposits were covered. So visually, he was able to look at the operating checking balance and know how much cash was available for operations. The separate bank accounts make this a quick and easy check, and no need to do any math in his head or to count claws. So we can see cash on hand is approximately twice the prepaid deposit balance all year long. We're at that 2.0 current ratio. Way to go, Gator. So Gator elected to slightly increase the charter pricing along with the 5% increases to all other activities, and only cross-sold the charter. Since the charter was a hit, most people actually elected to buy other activities because they wanted to use the charter. They wanted to go on the charter. So leading to better overall sales, a more engaged customer experience, and better utilization of his guides and boat costs. Overall, the Bayou Adventures gross margin increased to almost 80%, which was well above his 70 requirement. The charter itself specifically went up 22%, and he is more confident in managing his customer sales and his guides going into 2020.
That is such good news. Way to go, Gator.
Way to go, Gator. And overall, he met his gross profit margin goal of that 70%. So he better utilized the overhead operating costs, resulting in a $54,000 boost to net income. So, and that's the his 2019 net income's that box item that's in green. And after considering his salary, which he'd indicated is $50,000 per year about, his 2019 profit margin was at 4%. So there's definitely a room to boost this at least 10% in 2020, but he's tickled green to now have $56,000 net income. And you bet his bottom dollar that him and his accounting friend are going to have a plan on how to be able to do that in 2020.
I love that. Tickled green. Gator's tickled green.
Mm-hmm. So here's the profit and loss, all dates by year again.
So Zeb, what's going on here with 2020 column? I know we were talking about this a little bit early, but I would love to hear you explain it. So the January and the header, it's showing income from January through October in 2020, but that hasn't happened yet. How is it that we've got so much income there?
So remember your invoices, export and import, and the booking dates that you put in that were in the future? That's what we're seeing here.
That
right?
$50,000 on the accounts receivable aging report that we saw that was negative, there's the income for those future dates showing up in the future on the report.
Exactly. And with this information, we can start to predict the future and even plan accordingly.
Woohoo! So we've got Magic 8 Ball in our accounting software here. Here we go.
And then by generating the profit and loss for the future, and again displaying columns by month, we can see the future revenue based on pre-bookings by income stream even. So we can even generate this report by class to know exactly which activity is booked and when. By knowing this also gives us time to hire our guides, pre-book any other vendors related to the delivery of each of those activities months ahead of the activity actually taking place. We can capture those expenses using the accounts payable module in QuickBooks, similar to how you did the reservation integration stuff earlier with accounts receivable, and know what the gross profit margin will be for any particular activity in the future, all months in advance of the activity actually taking place. So how cool is that?
That is super, super slick. That's one of my favorite things about working in this industry. So thank you so much for that great information, Zeb. I think that really encapsulated why this depth of data can be super important to a growing tour business that wants to scale.
Oh, you're welcome, Ingrid. So now I know that all of this was a lot of information. So I want to leave you, the attendees, with a single action item. If you can remember to do only one thing, make sure to go talk to your accountant. And we want to make sure that you also have the preliminaries in place and a foundation for solid routines and reporting. If you don't feel this way, be sure to join the Tour Strategy Facebook group if you haven't done so already. Be open to the possibilities. Talk with the other people in the group who are out there doing the same thing you're doing, and find out how others are using these tools to manage their businesses. With many of these tools, you can completely automate your data process and use the information to make informed decisions.
Exactly right. And you don't have to do it alone. Like I said at the very beginning, it's important that you don't have to do this alone. Just as tours help me to translate the language as I navigate unfamiliar terrain and I travel all over the world, your accountant or business advisor can serve as a guide for you on this journey through the landscape of business finance. Together, we can embrace the emerging technology that is coming out for the tours industry and ease the way for the fantastic business owners who help us to see the world. You get to spend less time in the office and more time doing what you love. That's the important thing.
Here's some great free resources that can help you on this journey. So please join the Facebook group for Tours and Activities Business Strategies, where you can have discussions and ask questions with your colleagues in the industry.
So please also sign up for our newsletters so that you can stay in the loop on other webinars and educational opportunities that we might be offering in the future.
You can book appointments with one of us over email if you'd like to get get our eyes and brains involved in your specific business.
And visit our websites for tons of free articles, videos, and other great resources. So,
Joanne, thank you for the fabulous presentation comment. We appreciate that.
oh, yay! So with that, our emails and websites are up here listed on the slide. Thanks again so much for joining us here today, and thanks for doing what you do, helping us to experience our amazing and beautiful world through your dreams.
And we have about 6 minutes remaining for questions. So go ahead and post in the chat box for any of you that still have anything that's unanswered.
We actually had a great one just a moment ago from Claudia. So she was asking about she's in Costa Rica, so getting the bank feeds in QuickBooks uploaded into her QuickBooks Online, it does not pull the information in automatically. So I recommended a program to look into called 2QBO Convert that makes it so you can upload bank statements from the PDF, and it will convert those using OCR technology, the ocular recognition. And then she responded that unfortunately the currency being dual, it's not the same amount on expenditures. So you might need to get QuickBooks Online Plus and turn on the multi-currency tool in QuickBooks Online Plus. That could be worth looking into. And I'm scrolling back through to see if there were any previous questions. There was one earlier. I forgot who it was that posted it. But I wrote it down to make sure that we didn't forget about it. Someone asked about a good strategy if there's more than one sales tax type. So they've got 2 different taxes that they are paying. And what I would recommend off the top of my head is there's not going to be an easy way to split that out in the Peek to QuickBooks integration. So instead, lumping those taxes together in QuickBooks so you have the proper tax liability listed in QuickBooks, but you still want to use Peek to report on how much tax is owed to each of those 2 different tax agencies to be able to split it out and make the payments correctly. And then you'd record 2 different payments for that piece. Zeb, do you have any other ideas or suggestions around the different tax types?
If PeekPro has the ability to export them individually with taxes, you might have to see if they can do that on that Excel export. Then you could have a liability for each of them. But generally what I see, taxes overall, just like Ingrid said, people will do a single liability for encompassing all different taxes. But what they do oftentimes split out, though, is like payments to affiliates and payments to other kind of liabilities. So they can see all those at that kind of level on the balance sheet. But I'm not sure if Peek can split the taxes out at this moment, but you can definitely ask them. And the more that they hear information from people, they're going to be very receptive to making those kinds of changes in their systems.
Awesome. So Victor has a question about gift certificates, and actually, Rick asked about gift certificates. And that's actually the second time we heard about a gift certificates question on here. I replied earlier, but I want to reply so that everyone can hear it. So gift certificates are often recorded incorrectly. So we want to make sure everyone's got this part down. It's important. A gift certificate, when you sell one, is not income. That is a liability because you owe someone your services. You owe them a tour. And until they collect on that, it's a liability, not income. So you want to get that gift certificate item in your QuickBooks pointed to a gift certificate's liability account in your QuickBooks. And then when that person uses the gift certificate is the payment method. And that way they're purchasing the actual tour that they're purchasing, and that gets it into your income correctly and in the right class, so that it's just showing up that they bought that tour. It's that kind of income. And using the gift certificate payment method, it makes it so that you can then record that transaction as going through that liability account, and it will reduce the liability. So that is the main important thing for the gift certificates and how they're supposed to be recorded in your accounting. And Sebastian says, sorry, I joined later, so maybe this is already mentioned. Do we have a handout for this presentation? We don't have a handout. What we do have is this will be available on YouTube, so you can catch the replay as often and as many times as you need to. So you can go through this step by step as you're working to set up your Peek integration and as you are looking to run your reports in QuickBooks.
And Ingrid will have it on her Polymath YouTube page. I'll also have it on my Ascent Accounting YouTube page as well.
Yep. And then Carolina asks, I've not been able to find a good report for gift card redemption. Yes, for purchase. It would be great if other people ask Peek for it. So that's something that if other people are looking for that kind of thing in their Peek, submit that feedback to Peek, and Peek will hear the feedback. And if many, if they have a lot of squeaky wheels on that one, it will rise to the top of their priority list. So be aware, it's a good idea to talk with each other about the different problems you're having and submit feedback to your software vendors en masse. They'll actually roll out the changes you're looking for. Let's see here. And Carly says that she has QuickBooks Pro Desktop, so she guess she'll have to go online in order to use this integration. So this particular integration that we showed today is specific to QuickBooks Online. As we discussed before, TransactionPro does have a desktop option. And Val from TransactionPro, who is on our call today, thanks so much for joining us, Val, said that the 10% discount will work on their desktop product also. And that's a one-time purchase, not a subscription. So you can use that PeekPro promo code for desktop users too.
And then on that note, as Ingrid did mention earlier too, desktop isn't as, I guess, friendly with integrations for other systems. So as your businesses grow, I know that oftentimes we're adding on other different apps and other different tools. QuickBooks Online is very proactive in getting those integrations set up and plays a lot nicer. So if you anticipate to continue doing business in the future, and especially in a growth kind of capacity where you're bringing new stuff on, it might be an easier switch to go ahead and go over to online than to stay on desktop.
Yep. So it is the top of the hour, and we want to respect everyone's time. So I'm going to answer one more question, and then we're going to wrap up. Chuck is asking, what about the peak fee of 2% on each sale that rounds up at the end of the day total that's different from the same fee from each sale? So what I would recommend on those peak fees is when you are batching your deposits in QuickBooks, you will have the payments coming in for the amount that the customer paid to you for your tours without the peak fees being deducted. You do not want to deduct the peak fees on the invoices. You want to receive those payments for the full amount. And then when you batch the deposits, remove the full amount of the peak fees for the whole day of deposit in the deposit window. And that is a pretty standard practice for any merchant service that is deducting the fees directly from the deposit rather than deducting them in a separate transaction. And that would be a video for a different webinar. We didn't have we didn't have the room to cover that particular thing today. But like I said, you can look into the QuickBooks help guides on how to batch things together in your deposit window if you don't know how to do that. And if that is something that you'd like to see a video on, please join our Facebook group, which is Facebook.com/groups/tour strategy. Post that question, and perhaps we can do a quick online demonstration of that kind of tool. So if that's something you'd like to see, join the Facebook group and we will create that instruction for you.
Thank you, everyone, for attending the webinar today. Ingrid, thanks for hosting it on your Zoom profile. I wish everybody the best day and look forward to hearing from you guys in the future.
Yep. Thanks so much, everyone. Thanks for coming, and great luck on all of this. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.